we've never reviewed a video card with a design as breathtaking as this. This is the YESTON RX 580 Cute Pet Edition Polaris card, made by Chinese brand Yingtong, and it provides a much needed awakening that video card designs don't have to be only black, red, and gamer in theme. The YESTON card has a cute pet cooling solution with clouds of prosperity adorning the flanks of the shroud, further embellished with a breathing pulse LED behind purple diffusion plates in the shape of ears, a nose, and a mouth with a glowing face on top. We think it's a cat. We're not quite sure. YESTON says its avatar is named Wanwan, and we're more excited about this video card than most we've reviewed in the last year. Before that, this video is brought to you by us. If you'd like to help us rescue more of Wanwan's friends for reviews, go to store.gamersnexus.net and use code SAVEWANWAN to get 10% off any GN store purchase. We just restocked our GN Blueprint shirt design in a comfortable Heather True Royal dual blend. We've printed our final run of chalkboard t-shirts, available now, and our widely used Gamers Nexus mod mats for PC building and modding are listed in large and medium. You can also apply the code to our still new GN GPU disassembly toolkit. Don't let Wanwan be sad. Help us import more of his friends with code SAVEWANWAN at store.gamersnexus.net. 这是 Wanwan. 他很可爱, 很小. He's very, very cute and very small. We're not quite sure what Wanwan is, but nevertheless, in the very least, he's probably, or she, the most adorable, we'll say, video card design we've yet seen. But there's something to be said for this. As much as looking at this card is kind of just a humorous thing, we obviously bought it because of how it looks, and really for no other reason, although its cooling solution is surprisingly not bad. But despite all of that, despite the fact that it's just kind of a joke and kind of amusing and a break from the more serious, the more serious content, this is a breath of fresh air that, in fact, there are other ways to design video card shrouds without making the cooling garbage. So we're so accustomed to the stuff that comes through for review. It's so serious, all of it. It's really serious for performance, or it's really serious for value and cost cutting, or it's really serious for looking kind of business-like. And that's all well and good, but it's sort of everything. It's everything we've reviewed in the video card space for the last few years. And every now and again, we get to do something special and look at someone's card that's just simply different. All right, so the obvious stuff of looks aside, let's talk about some of the basics here. Most importantly, and first and foremost in the spec sheet, this is a 2048 SP version of the RX 580. That's not the RX 580. It's a cut down RX 580, and we previously shamed AMD for naming it basically the same thing, except adding 2048 to the end of it. It's kind of like naming your card GT 1030 and then releasing one later that's called GT 1030 DDR4 and not really making it a big deal, and people just kind of see the 1030 part, assume it's the same, and buy that. It's the same principle, but we've done that discussion. It's not YESTON's fault that that's what they ended up using. That's AMD's fault for naming it that. Either way, though, most important to remember here is that the 2048 version of the RX 580 is cut down. It's cut down from 2304 streaming processors, and that will impact performance. So even overclocking this past a standard RX 580 will not overcome in all scenarios the loss, the deficit in streaming processors. And we bought this for about $205 US. I think it was maybe free shipping or cheap shipping from AliExpress, as it often is. $205 is not a good deal for an RX 580, and most certainly not for one that's cut down. But obviously, once again, you're not buying this to get a good deal. If you're buying it at all, other than just watching this because you think, hey, that's kind of different and cool, or whatever you think, you're buying it really just because of how it looks. So it gets a bit more of a pass there. We're not going to focus too seriously on this as a comparative versus other 580s. It's old. You're not buying this because it's better than 580A or B. You're buying it because hopefully it's good enough and it looks different. So this will be focused on the card itself. It does have a 0 RPM mode, which is, although not that special of a feature, it's special enough to kind of illustrate that, you know, this is not it's not a knockoff card. YESTON's a real brand. They make real video cards. They do real shroud and heatsink designs. It's not some fly-by-night brand. So just wanted to point that out. Features illustrated by YESTON include pink-purple breathing lamp, and design of multi-cooling holes to assist dissipation. That last point, not so relevant. The pink-purple breathing lamp would be this bit here, and in the front, it does glow. But anyway, let's get into the testing, and we'll talk about how the card did, because it's probably better than most people would expect. This chart shows frequency response of the YESTON Cute Pet card, allowing us to better understand the frequency and thermal response to load. In this test, the YESTON RX 580 ends up at about 1250 MHz core frequency, sustained with relative stability throughout the Firestrike Extreme freeze. GPU temperature during this time is about 72 degrees Celsius, which is where the VBIOS targets its temperature. For reference, the MSI RX 580 Gaming X card, a pretty serious performance-oriented solution, ends up with a held frequency of about 1360 MHz when on stock VBIOS, and thus establishing a noteworthy gain in frequency that will translate to average frame rate. We were able to compensate for this later with overclocking on the YESTON, but for auto results, MSI is far ahead. This is true for most other board partner RX 580 cards that we've worked with too. MSI's Gaming X GPU temperature target is set to 70 degrees, but remember, GPU target is just a number. It doesn't really mean a whole lot because the fans will adjust to meet that target, so we're not really comparing head to head here. All it tells you is where they target temperature out of box, and then we need to look at fan comparisons for noise levels, and later maybe noise normalized for testing after that. For the fan response, the YESTON Cute Pet 580 sustains a fan RPM of about 1230 to maintain a 72 degree core temperature, which marks its auto noise levels at about 34.4 dBA at 20 inches in our testing. This cooler design is overall competent for GPU cooling and fully capable of keeping the GPU with its auto frequency configuration within competitive operating temperatures. We need some more data to better understand how this compares, and that's what the next few charts will help with. But keep in mind also that the lower stock frequency is helpful in lowering the thermal requirement of the cooler, and that's part of why the fan can spin as slowly as it does. Speaking of noise levels, here's a quick chart to illustrate the fan RPM scaling versus noise on the Inton RX 580 Cute Pet card. The card tends to operate within the 34 dBA range when left to auto-control itself, which is quieter than the average partner model card that we've reviewed lately. But the RX 580 is also lower power consumption than a lot of the cards we've been working with. Relatively effective GPU cooling allows YESTON to run quieter fan speeds. The 40 dBA mark happens in the 1750 RPM range, with the maximum RPM hitting 55 dBA, although few will ever run it this fast because you would need to manually do it. It's not going to happen when running auto. As for the cooler design, it's straightforward but reasonably effective for a lower-ish TDP GPU by modern standards with a restricted stock frequency. And that's really where the drop in power consumption comes from. If YESTON had pushed frequency higher out of the box, it'd be more competitive in FPS, stock anyway, as you'll see later, but it would also run warmer. The cooler is easy to remove and low maintenance, making it trivial to replace paste if later desired. 4 screws pull the cooler proper off, with additional pan head screws used to secure the backplate to the PCB. We actually never run into the rounder type of screws for securing components to the PCB, so this is unique, but also overall inconsequential to cooler design or card quality. It's just different. The cooler uses a smooth copper cold plate to sink heat from the GPU and memory alike, with proper and adequate contact made between the GDDR5 memory and the cold plate, but also with the cooler. YESTON's paste application could have been better, with uneven mounting pressure and or paste distribution causing compound to bias toward one corner and nearly going underpasted on the opposite corner, but it's acceptable overall. The heatsink is fairly standard, using 4 6mm heat pipes to contact the GPU cold plate and conduct heat away from the plate and into the fin stack. There's one major inefficiency that could improve cooler performance further, perhaps unnecessarily so for a card that's made so long after the fact and for a specific market, but it's an improvement to Avenue nonetheless. If looking down the heat pipes carefully, you can see straight through the other side of the cold plate. Although the plate makes contact with the heat pipes, additional surface area contact would be enabled with an interface layer between the heat pipes and the plate, like welding or soldering to secure the two. More metal would also help, but more importantly, getting the heat pipes closer together and in direct contact with each other, wall to wall, would help in reducing the large air gaps found above the GPU and the memory cold plate. The GPU thermals were okay overall, and the card isn't something we're too serious about for performance, seeing as that's obviously not the reason to buy it. But this is a major area for improvement that's wide open. It just so happens that the card is good enough right now, and when your selling point isn't performance, good enough is good enough to sell the card. In this instance, the air gaps between the heat pipes and the cold plate are somewhat substantial, but otherwise the cooler does work well enough in cooling, and with the 60-ish degree result at 40 dBA, there's not too much to complain about for GPU temperature. It's clear that this is an inefficient use of space, but that it's still sufficient for the Polaris GPU. Overclock stepping is next. In our overclock tuning for the card, we found we were easily able to remedy the somewhat surprisingly low stock frequency for the card. The PCB is more or less a reference design from Polaris, so it's okay for overclocking, especially since there's so much headroom for running a low stock frequency. The card sustained 1420 MHz in some games, or 1400 MHz in all games, with memory frequency stable at 2150 in all games, or 2200 in some of the other ones. This was with 150% power target and auto fan speed control, which maintained a 75-degree GPU target once you set 150% power for the power target, or a noise level of approximately 41.8 dBA. Not bad. This gets it past the MSI RX 580 Gaming X's stock frequency and helps level the playing field, although you could then overclock that card if you wanted to. For some quick gaming benchmarks, we'll look primarily between the YESTON card and the Gaming X 580 for perspective of a higher-end model. We'll start with Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p. The RX 580 is an aging design here, but still reasonably capable as a performer. At 1080p, the RX 580 YESTON card ends up at just 52.5 FPS average when stock. This performance is overall poor when compared to the GTX 1060 6GB at 62 FPS average, and more importantly, MSI's Gaming X 580 of the same GPU. There's a massive gap, allowing a 27% improvement to the MSI card. This was corrected for with an overclock, which got the YESTON video card to 64 FPS average. The reason there's still a lead for the MSI card, even after achieving higher clocks on this thing, is because of the stream processor difference. So remember, the 580 original model carries 2304 SPs, whereas the RX 580 2048 carries, well, you can guess how many it has, but that's the reason the MSI card still holds a lead, even with the clock advantage of the YESTON card. Strange Brigade at 1440p with DirectX 12 positions the 580 Gaming X at 69 FPS average, predictably just behind the RX 590 re-refresh. The RX 580 Cube PET had a 61 FPS average, allowing the Gaming X another massive lead of 14%. Overclocking YESTON pushed it to 66 FPS average, allowing it to close the gap on the Gaming X. Moving on to GTA 5, it's the same thing. At 1080p, we're at 64 FPS average stock, but about 70 FPS average when overclocked on the YESTON card. The Gaming X from MSI runs at 72 FPS average stock, with the RX 590 Fatboy refresh, basically an overclocked 580, which is an overclocked 480. The 590 Fatboy is at 75 FPS average. The performance uplift from overclocking the YESTON card is worth it, but still doesn't quite level the playing field with the MSI card, and keep in mind that too can overclock. Conclusions then, much to the disappointment of probably everyone watching, this is not in fact a good deal, especially if you live outside of China, you live outside of the region where it's sold locally and you do have to order it. The shipping might not cost anything, but you're still paying for it somewhere. And it's just the gaming performance is obviously quite a bit lower than a 580 with the full 2304 stream processors. So that is an advantage for standard 580s. But we do have a soft spot in our hearts for this design because it's kind of fun and it's different. And genuinely, seriously, we hope that some of the video card makers who sell in volume in the US look at this and kind of look beyond the cuteness of it and go, okay, how else can we apply this idea? It doesn't have to be a cute video card. It doesn't have to be pink and purple and bright blue with happy clouds and cats on it. Just something different. You can still do cool gamer edgelord as a video card design, but have something unique about it. For example, maybe imagine a video card that comes with its own neckbeard. That would fit the edgelord category of gamer video cards. But we had a video card manufacturer actually visit us in the last few days, and I won't say which company it was, but they did take a look at the card, and we did talk about the option of doing things like licensing game IP. Asus is the only one I can think of that's ever done it. I'm sure there were others, but Asus in the most recent history did an Assassin's Creed collaboration where they had a limited edition Assassin's Creed card. Wasn't the most amazing design, but it's the beginnings of an approach to something different without sacrificing cooling design, without making it just a silly knockoff for the sake of being a silly knockoff. So anyway, kind of refreshing and fun, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. If there's other stuff you want to see us buy from AliExpress and test out, let us know. Patrick's always happy to spend my money to do that. And I did run the GPU testing, but don't worry, we found some stuff for Patrick to test as well in his category of case reviews. Stay tuned for that. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net if you would like to help us directly funding these purchases, like with mod mats or shirt purchases. And you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to get the latest behind the scenes video that we uploaded in the last week or so. I'll see you all next time.